Ladies, gentlemen, and raiders of all larks, everyone knows as much as it can be a bit of an uneasy situation when you're around other raiders, being completely unsure whether you can or cannot trust them. There's one enemy that we all have in common, the Ark, and there are plenty of reasons to want to hunt them down, whether you're looking for drivers or cores to upgrade your workshops, or just looking to farm targets for experience and general loot value because big Ark are very good for that, or hey, maybe you just want to make post-apocalyptic Italy a slightly safer place for everyone by taking the Ark out, regardless of what it does for you personally. That said, a lot of the bigger Ark can be a little bit threatening at first glance, but once you know how to deal with them, they become a lot simpler. No matter your specific reasons for engaging with them, Ark are everywhere and you're bound to fight every kind of Ark at some point in your time playing the game for one reason or another, and so today we're going to go over an updated guide on how to kill each Ark enemy type, any tips or tricks for them in general, and specific recommendations of the most effective way to kill each one if you have the options, so that you can be prepared if you have a specific goal you want to achieve going into the raid, especially after the changes that we've had to our Ark killing methods as of patch 1.3. And I won't be going into stuff like the legendary weapons on this one, but yes, the legendary weapons are built to be specifically very good at killing bigger Ark or exposing their weak points, but I'd argue that the legendary weapons aren't very cost effective to do it in comparison to most of the things we'll be talking about today instead. Before we get into each Ark then, some more general tips for killing Ark. Grenades and mines are top tier Ark killers. Specifically, the best one above all for most situations is the Deadline Mine, which was added in with the North Line update. I haven't seen anyone claim that they've found the blueprint for this one yet, which leads me to believe that the blueprint does not actually exist in a way that we can get it as of this point, but you can buy one of these per day from the grenade trader, which is unfortunately down from the 3 that you used to be able to buy per day before the recent patch. But one Deadline Mine is enough to just kill most large Ark all in itself, like you can, even after patch 1.3, still one-shot a Bombardier with the Deadline Mine. Not to get ahead of ourselves here on specific Ark strats, but just as an example, this works very well even still. Secondary to that in Ark killing power is the Wolfpack Grenade. This thing on paper does more damage than even the Deadline Mine does, but Deadline is easier to put in range of weak points and it does all of its damage in one concentrated location. Wolfpack explodes mid-air into 12 separate projectiles that then seek the nearest Ark enemy to them. This won't one-shot the largest Ark, but it can one-shot a lot of the mid to high tier ones, the only real downside being the cost compared to cheaper grenades. But the effectiveness here is very important to note. Past that, you've got the smaller, cheaper grenades that are worth mentioning too. Top of the list for this is trigger nades. The blueprint for these is unlocked from an early quest. Make sure that you do that because they are very, very good. They're relatively cheap to craft compared to the previous grenade and mine that we've talked about at least. 90 damage for the blast, and these will stick to surfaces including Ark, and they detonate when you tell them to. Heavy fuse grenades is another option, do 80 damage. They are a little bit cheaper to craft than trigger nades, but the downside is that they do not stick to surfaces, so you have to be a bit more precise about your aim and timing when throwing them. And then snap blast grenades are a good tertiary option here. They do 70 damage, they stick to surfaces, and they explode after a timer, relatively cheap to craft too. Blaze grenades were used a lot before patch 1.3 for the bigger and less mobile Ark, but they have been nerfed quite heavily in the patch. They were one of the things that was hitting multiple body parts at the same time and doing exponentially more damage than they should because of that, so now most players are reporting that these are about half as effective, if that, so I'm no longer really recommending these for Ark killing purposes. It's worth noting that there are things like seeker grenades as well, which do 50 damage a pop, and they do home in on the nearest Ark when you throw them, so they're quite effective for very small Ark if you don't want to actually stop and deal with them and aim. If you just want to throw it and forget about it, it does still take 2 of these to down a Hornet because Hornets seem to have like 60 health, so it is just slightly out of the range of being the perfect Hornet counter, but it's still a decent grenade to have around. And then the final thing to note then, as far as really important big grenades, is the Showstopper. This stuns Ark for up to 10 seconds. It does require some precise throwing on the larger Ark, but these are a super useful utility for killing dangerous Ark because you can stop them from being able to fight back for a long period of time. You can also just carry stuff like light impact grenades. These are extremely cheap to craft to the point that you might as well have a bunch of them with you on every raid that you do, but they have a small blast radius, small damage at only 30, and so it's useful to have these for flying Ark. Like Wasps, they will one-shot, Hornets, they two-shot, but for anything bigger than that, they get very immediately outclassed by all the other grenade options we've talked about so far. Past that, as far as specific weapons, and again ignoring the legendary weapons as I've already mentioned, those are very effective but also very costly. The one that was the best before this patch was the Hullcracker. This is essentially a grenade launcher that only detonates on impact if you're hitting an Ark enemy. They neutered this quite hard in the recent patch though. Specifically, this was affected a lot by the explosive damage hitting multiple body parts, and now you just need to be way more precise with it to get similar results, and even then your results will be much worse. It is still an effective weapon for killing arc in the greater scheme of things, but now instead of being able to just spam fire center mass at an arc, you have to actually purposefully aim for the weak spots, and even then the actual kill time is definitely longer than it was. This can still be worth it for some depending on what you're doing, but the Hullcracker is no longer the be-all end-all of options for hunting down big arc. It's now relatively equivalent in value and cost to grenades, but it takes longer to get through them. Past that, weapons that use heavy ammo are generally going to be your best friend for killing arc. Light ammo weapons can kill arc if you know what their weak points are and you're super accurate at hitting them, but heavy ammo has penetration, which lowers the required precision. And for things like the really big arc, while light and medium ammo can take out stuff like the leg weak points on a Bastion, heavy ammo will help, so even if you miss and hit like the metal plate beside the actual joint, it will go through and still hit the joint and make it just a little bit easier. So as of patch 1.3, I would say your best friends for arc killing are those grenades and mines of various kinds that I went through in order, followed by the Hullcracker still if grenades aren't an option for some reason, maybe you don't have the crafting recipes or the materials for crafting those specific things, but the Hullcracker has a lot of costs tied to it, and it is only really worth using for the properly big guys. Anything below that, you're absolutely fine just using heavy ammo weapons to get the job done, or some grenades. As well, a couple of quick shout out to utility items. The photoelectric cloak is an item that you can use to essentially just be invisible to arc while you're holding the button down. You can craft these once your utility station is upgraded. They aren't necessarily cheap, but the value that they can provide is essentially letting you get super close to any large arc without them aggroing on you, which then lets you combo into mines or traps or grenades very easily before getting to a safe distance, and then you can just repeat this. These are super useful for arc hunting of all kinds. That said, let's get into tips for specific arc. If you are looking for the locations of a specific arc, if you're trying to hunt them down, just Google Arc Raiders interactive map. There are a number of them around the place, and they have arc spawn locations for each map, which makes it quite easy to track down anything specific you're looking for. As for dealing with them, starting with the low tier flyers, wasps and hornets, the easiest way to counter these guys is just shooting out their turbines, the little thrusters they have on each of their four corners. Hornets have armor on their front thrusters, wasps don't have any armor, and 2 thrusters destroyed will disable flight for either one. They are trivial from that point, they will pretty much just explode when they hit the ground, or they can be easily meleeed if they don't for whatever reason. Don't bother wasting grenades or Hullcracker ammo on these for the most part. The value you get for the cost is just not worth it in comparison just shooting them with normal guns, which you can do easily. For pops, you can shoot these with any ammo type and they'll just explode super quickly, or you can melee them if you're feeling brave, and if you do it fast enough, the explosion won't hurt you. Fireballs will die to 1 heavy ammo shot very easily even when they're completely covered up, or if you just let them roll up to you when they reach close range, they will expose their core, and then you can pop them super easily when they do. So the trick to fireballs is actually patience. For ticks, you can melee them, you can shoot them, they're super weak, not a big deal, just a little annoying. For turrets, heavy ammo is your best friend. 2 shots from a heavy weapon and the turret will go down nice and easy, very simple, just play from cover and you should be fine. Sentinel turrets are the sniper variation of the turrets. They have a lot longer range, they hit much harder, and they are a little bit tankier, but around 5 shots from a heavy ammo weapon will take these down quite easily as well. Again, just play around cover and it should be okay. It's not really worth using anything bigger for these. For snitches, these float around in the sky and they spot you. They're easily taken down with heavy ammo. Aim for the glowing circle spots on their underside. If you break off one of their 3 side plates, they'll start flying erratically. Break off a second one and they'll just straight up die. Otherwise, you can just shoot them. I recommend longer range weapons for these, and while heavy ammo is great against them, it's not overly necessary as they don't have much armor. Next up, surveyors, the big rolling armored balls that basically just run away from you. If you are stealthy enough to catch one of these while it's firing the beam into the sky and its core is exposed, you can get a free shot in, which does a ton of damage to it. Otherwise, for these, I heavily recommend trying to stun them, either using showstopper grenades or hornet drivers. These will work too for a shorter duration stun effect. And then when they are immobilized, you can just rail through them in one spot so you penetrate through their shell to hit their core. And the ideal method is to bring trigger grenades. 2 or 3 does the job for these. And in combination with either the showstopper or just using a photoelectric cloak to sneak up, you can blast one of them down extremely quickly. And it's worth noting, for those who aren't aware, surveyors actually have a surprisingly high blueprint drop rate as well, which makes them much more valuable to be actively hunting down. Then we get to the bigger, more threatening arc that will actually fight back against you properly, and these are where the proper preparation and strategy really starts to matter a bit more. For shredders with pure guns, you can take them down. It'll take a while, but the main strategy is just to shoot at the thruster at the bottom, heavy ammo ideally. Shots to the thruster will knock it completely off balance, it can send it flying, it disrupts its movement, and it sort of flinches it. The main best way to deal with them though is through grenades. Trigger nades are the best, snap blasts are second for this, heavy fuse grenades are an option, but the lack of sticking to surfaces is more of a detriment on something like this, which is quite mobile. It will generally take 2 or 3 of these depending on which specific grenade you use. Corners can protect you from their attacks as well, as can raw distance. For leapers, you want to go out of your way to hit the core, the big central orb. You can break their legs, which will hinder their movement, but they take way more raw damage in the core at their center mass, so always aim for center mass. Heavy weapons will get through this with enough shots, but again, grenades are a good friend for this purpose as well. A few trigger nades, slap blast grenades, or heavy fuses, and it'll drop to the ground for you to be able to loot because it's dead. Just make sure to fight it from somewhere where you have vertical cover so it cannot land on top of you when it jumps, and somewhere where you can back up a bit if it does its pulse attack so that doesn't hit you either. If you have a Hullcracker, just treat them basically the same way. Hullcracker at their thruster for the shredder, Hullcracker at the core for the leaper, and it's worth mentioning before patch 1.3 the Hullcracker took 5 or 6 shots to the core to kill a leaper, now it's closer to 10, so nearly double, but still much quicker and easier than guns, but arguably more difficult than just using grenades at that point, so I'm going to instead just recommend sticking to grenades for these guys at least if you have the resources to craft them consistently. Next up then, let's talk about the next stage up, which are the 2 big tanky ground arc, the Bastion and the Bombardier. These have a lot of overlap with a few differences, so I'll be sort of talking about them together here. These are way easier to fight in a group. They have a battery on their back that you can break and then expose the core, which makes them basically a free kill at that point, and they can only ever face one direction at a time. So if you are in a group, spread out around them, and one player should always be able to hit their weak spot. Solo, it's a little bit harder. The intended strategy if you're working with low resources is to shoot the yellow knee joints until you get a stun. Then run around the back and shoot the battery until the stun ends. Repeat this over and over until the battery breaks. This will expose the core, and then you can shoot the core to win because the core is where it takes the most damage. But this is so much of a hassle, so much of a time investment, that I don't even recommend doing this a whole lot unless you absolutely have to. Instead, you should probably just use utility. When fighting a Bombardier, always make sure that you have vertical cover so it can't hit you from above, as that's where most of its attacks will come from. And you also want some sort of other cover in front of you to hide between if it fires directly towards you. For a Bastion, you just need front cover, as it just fires machine guns directly at you. Before the patch, the most cost-efficient, time-efficient way to kill these guys was to do exactly that method, but with a Hullcracker, as it just does more damage to these weak spots and breaks through it quicker. Only 3 Hullcracker shots even now will pop a leg and bring them down into their stun state, which is quite quick. We also did used to just walk up to these and spam fire Hullcracker shots at their face because the Hullcracker was strong enough to make that still worth it, just for the increased speed of getting the job done. But pre-patch, that took 15 Hullcracker shots to kill a Bastion while doing that. Post-patch, it takes 31 shots, so basically double, and now the actual value of this method is much more in line with an equivalent cost in grenades, essentially. Instead, either focus the weak points, or do the smarter option, which is grenades or mines. One deadline mine is enough to one-shot a Bombardier. It should be enough to one-shot a Bastion as well, but they are a bit tankier, so you should bring some extra grenades just in case too. You can use the photoelectric cloak item to sidle on up to them safely, then attach a deadline mine, then just run away as safely as you can, and then the job will be done. Otherwise, the next most cost and time efficient way would be to bring lots and lots of smaller grenades. Depending on the specific type of grenades, a combination of around 12 of either trigger, heavy fuse, or snap blast grenades, as all these have relatively close damage numbers. 12 or so of those in some configuration is usually enough to kill a Bastion. 8 to 10 is usually enough to kill a Bombardier, and like the deadline mine, you can just use your cloak to get up close, throw some grenades, and then take cover and repeat this if necessary if you don't kill it in the initial barrage. As for a bit more of a budget comparison on grenades compared to Hullcrackers and their ammo on these guys specifically now, to really explain why I think that the grenades are the better option, let's take Bastion as an example, as the more armored of the two. Again, full frontal center mass shots, not focusing weak spots, 31 Hullcracker shots on current patch. For mines, again, one deadline mine, well placed on center mass, will do the job. For grenades, 10 to 12 in some configuration is enough to kill it without particularly specific aim. Straight up purchasing 31 launcher ammo after their cost increase in the patch as well would be 23,250 coins. It is 750 coins per singular shot. One deadline mine, while you can only buy one per day, costs 15,000 coins, so one deadline mine for a full kill is actually the cheapest option here. 12 snap blast grenades are 28,800 coins. It's a bit more if you were to work in heavy fuses and such as well, because those do cost more, but a couple of bonus considerations are that grenades like this are actually quite easy to just collect and find in the wild while you're just looting the world in general, and they are relatively cheap to craft as well, especially in comparison to launcher ammo, which is only findable in Bombardier corpses or a much heftier craft cost for the value it gives you. And then there's also the consideration that you are taking a Hullcracker into the raid with you, which in itself is a 30,000 coin investment that you could lose at any point if you die. Basically, if you already have launcher ammo because you're killing Bombardiers and taking it, Hullcrackers aren't too bad to use. If you, for whatever reason, cannot buy or craft grenades in a high enough quantity, then Hullcrackers are still not bad to use. But generally speaking, I would say that grenades are easier to use, they are faster to use, and they don't have the inherent risk of having to bring the Hullcracker itself in, which is something that can't go in a safe pocket, whereas a lot of your grenades can fit in your safe pocket. So generally, I would say that grenades are a more reliable way to kill bigger arcs than Hullcracker are now. That's not to say that Hullcracker is completely useless. You can still use it. It is essentially equivalent cost, but there is more inherent risk. Next up, let's talk about Rocketeers, and for these you have a couple of options. If you don't have anything but guns, heavy ammo poking away at their thrusters, once you break the armor, you can shoot the thrusters themselves, break 2 of the thrusters, and the Rocketeer will come down, and just like the smaller flying arc, this will pretty much just end them. This can take quite a bit of doing though for a Rocketeer, as they're very armored, which is why this is one that I do think the Hullcracker still definitely has at least some value for, as even post-patch, it's still around 11 Hullcracker shots to take down a Rocketeer, depending on where you hit it. That said, by far the fastest and most efficient way to get through a Rocketeer is a wolf pack if you have them available, or if you have the blueprint for crafting them. They aren't crazy expensive compared to the value you can bring back from fully looting a Rocketeer. And I would say that Rocketeers are pretty much the prime usage of the wolf pack grenade in general, so if you have wolf packs, use them for Rocketeers. This then is the grenade that just fires out secret projectiles. If you throw it so that the arc of the grenade has it land just above the Rocketeer, it will pop when it reaches proximity to close to the Rocketeer, and if the Rocketeer is the only arc within range, which is an important thing to mention here, it will just one-shot the Rocketeer completely in an instant because all 12 projectiles will seek it, and that is enough damage, and that is incredibly high value and the fastest way to kill them. And if you don't have wolf packs, Hullcracker is probably your next safest bet. Or, you know, if you're an absolute madman, you could always snap hook to the top of the Rocketeer and then use a deadline mine on it, but while this will absolutely 100% kill the Rocketeer if you succeed, your own survival is not quite as guaranteed, but it is still cool as hell, right? Past that, then, we have the full videos going over the Queen and the Matriarch strategies, because they are definitely their own beasts entirely, and I recommend checking out those videos for those two arc, but with the note that with the Hullcracker nerfs after the update, it can take up to double the amount of shots as it used to take down either one, which is a ton of investment, and the generally most efficient way to take down either the Queen or the Matriarch is actually deadline mines. The awkwardness is, of course, that you can only buy one of these mines per day now, and it takes 7 of them placed well on the bottom of the Queen to kill her. I would bring 8 if I was solo just to be totally safe, and for the Matriarch it's essentially the same, maybe just 1 more mine than you would bring for the Queen just to be safe as well. The actual strat for this then is to use the photoelectric cloak to sneak up while it is not aggroed, reach up and place a deadline mine on the underside of the hull, and then when it explodes it will do a ton of damage. After you place the mine, you want to immediately run away to cover somewhere safe, and then essentially just wait it out until the boss drops aggro on you and goes back to being passive, and then repeat this process until it dies. If other players have the aggro from her, if they are attacking the Queen or Matriarch, you can just run up and stick a mine on them basically for free. As long as the arc isn't directly looking at you, it's quite easy to get away with this, but this is the strat for doing it safely and alone. All in all, the main differences today are that Hullcracker damage to things with multiple limbs like Leapers, Bastions, and Bombardiers is way down from what it was before. The cost of Hullcracker ammo is also up, but overall, aside from the risk of having a Hullcracker that you could lose, and that being a good chunk of money, the cost of the raw ammo and the equivalent cost of grenades that you'd be making isn't crazy far off. They are relatively equivalent, whereas before this patch, I would say that Hullcracker was much more economy efficient to run. That to say, the Hullcracker is weaker than before, and there are many times you would rather have grenades now because they're easier to use, but as far as literal value, they are pretty equivalent at this stage. It's mostly just about what you can craft and access the easiest based on your own blueprints and resources, and otherwise, I've just been doing my best to give you the proper strategies and tactics to do this regardless of what you do have. That does it for today then, everyone, an updated guide on how to kill each Arc enemy in Arc Raiders. I hope you've all enjoyed this, and hopefully it helps you out in your continued journey to eradicate all of the non-humans from this once beautiful planet. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.